Hey, how's everyone doing? Today I'm back with a mini book haul. Some titles I've had to accrue through Amazon and online sources, since it's hard to find this kind of stuff for me here in Japan, English language books of this type, of this specialized nature. Anyway, I've had a whole barrage of long videos recently. I apologize. I'll try to make this one a little shorter, a little more pithy and to the point. So let's get started. So I'm going to talk about 6 books I got. I know it's a measly little tiny book haul, but I'm pretty excited about it. Half of the titles are Robert E. Howard titles that I can add to my collection. I did a Robert E. Howard shelf tour a little while back. These are some new additions, which I hope you will enjoy taking a look at. Many of you might have these already, so let's get started with that. And then we'll go into some other titles that aren't Robert E. Howard, but are also cool. All right, so the first Robert E. Howard book I got in the mail not so long ago is Sailor Steve Costigan, The Walloping Windjammer. This is the complete collection of published stories of Robert E. Howard's boxing hero, Sailor Steve Costigan, who's kind of a lunk-headed but big-hearted and ready to scrap at any time sailor on a merchant marine vessel called the Sea Girl. And in every port he gets involved in various scrapes. He's not the smartest tool in the shed. These are comic stories in the Texas tall tale tradition that Robert E. Howard grew up in. And these were gathered mostly in 4 different pulp magazines. And this edition came out in 2019. It's from Pulplit Press out of Corvallis, Oregon. But I believe this one was probably print on demand. It has that kind of print on demand barcode in the back. And again, here in Japan, usually I have to get, unless I have someone sending me something from overseas, or I order something to be shipped to me from overseas. Most of the books I get while I'm here in Japan are new. So anyway, this has an introduction and annotations from Finn J.D. John. And you can say his name there on the bottom. And it's got some cool pulp cover reproductions on the back where some of these stories appeared in. And of course the big ugly ISBN, sadly. Now, what's cool about this, it has a very interesting introduction and also the table of contents. There are 21 stories in this. The first 18 stories or so were published between 1929 and 1932 in 2 different pulps, fight stories and action stories magazines. And the last 4 were published in 1934 in Magic Carpet and Dempsey Fight magazine. And they have some funny titles: The Slugger's Game and The Bulldog Breed and The TNT Punch, Alleys of Peril, The Sign of the Snake, Texas Fists, Fist and Fang, etc. And then we have the introduction and, of course, the book as well is done in this nice double column reminiscent of the pulp's style. There's not any art in here to speak of, but again, it's a nicely put together volume. Sailor Steve Costigan, again, is, he's probably the most famous of Robert E. Howard's, boxing story heroes. There's Dennis Dorgan and a few others that, he had many boxing stories. Robert E. Howard was an amateur boxer in real life, and it sounds like a not bad one. And he's, of course, an amazing writer, and he found a viable market for his stories. According to the introduction, fight stories would pay $100 for each story and right away, upon acceptance. So that was a good way for him to pay the bills while he was waiting for checks from Farnsworth Wright that weren't always quickly forthcoming for his Weird Tales work. Now, these are quite funny, narrated by Steve Costigan, Sailor Steve Costigan. I'll give you a little taste of the style here from the first story, The Pit and the Serpent. And this is before Steve gets a hold of his pet bulldog, Mike, who becomes kind of the straight man in these stories as they go on. Anyway, this short story is first published in July 1929 issue of Fight Stories. The minute I stepped ashore from the Sea Girl merchantman, I had a hunch there would be trouble. This hunch was caused by seeing some of the crew of the Dauntless. The men on the Dauntless have disliked the Sea Girl's crew ever since our skipper took their captain to a cleaning on the wharfs in Zanzibar. They claimed that the old man had a knuckle duster on his right, which is ridiculous and a dirty lie. He had it on his left. So you get the idea there. Anyway, very fun stories. I've read the first one already. We haven't got, Mike's not in the first story, his bulldog, but he comes in, of course, the very next one, the Bulldog Breed, where Steve Costigan is, pushed into a fight with a much more wily and tougher opponent in order to defend the honor of Mike, the bulldog, and then they become fast friends after that. Now, this is Cimmerian September, an event created by Michael K. Vaughan to celebrate the works of Robert E. Howard, Conan, and otherwise. In the interim, I'm reading some of these Sailor Steve Costigan stories, and I'm also reading Elborak. Now, I'll show you one of my new acquisitions about Elborak in a moment, but right now I'm reading this book here, this old zebra edition, beautiful zebra edition of the Lost Valley of Iskander, and this has 3 Elborak stories, 2 novellas basically, and 1 novelette. This was published by Zebra Books in 1976, authorized by Glenn Lord, the executive of Robert E. Howard's estate, and this has, wraparound cover and fantastic art by Michael W. Kaluta, and I believe this is Jeff Jones cover art. Anyway, this is the one I'm reading now. Ben at Grammaticus did a terrific review of this book, and I will do my own review down the road. I finally pulled the trigger on one of these nice Del Rey collections of Robert E. Howard tales, and this is Elborak and Other Desert Adventures. This collects all the Elborak stories. Now, I have some already in old paperbacks, mostly from Zebra. Elborak is a super cool character, probably one of my favorite, if not, vying for top favorite of Robert E. Howard's creations. He's endlessly resourceful, super tough, able to blend in like a native in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places that he travels through, able to speak many different languages, a fiend with a sword, and a crack shot with the pistol from his Texas cowboy gunslinging background, and feared and respected throughout the land. And this is set around 1920s era, where a lot of warring factions were vying for dominance, and Elborak, the Swift, as he is called by friends and enemies alike, feared and respected wherever he goes, gets involved in all sorts of hair-raising and exciting adventures in these tales. So I was happy to get a hold of this. It has some really nice art. It's got a nice cover there by, I'm assuming this is the Jim and Ruth Keegan art, and then we also have some Tim Bradstreet art, which is a little more to my taste. There's art, a fair amount of art all the way through this book. Look at that one. That one's pretty cool, huh? And of course, these are the unexpurgated texts from Robert E. Howard's originals. There's both the short story and novel-length form of The Three-Bladed Doom, which is a book I read earlier this year and absolutely loved. One of the best books I've read so far this year, even though it was written, almost 100 years ago. Anyway, gotta like a lot of art in the book. And this is trade paper. It came a little bit dinged up on the corner, sadly. I've been able to flatten it down a bit, having it sandwiched under some heavier tomes. But, sometimes these paperbacks, trade paperbacks, especially a little heavy one like this, can take a little beating when they're shipped. Now, the final Robert E. Howard book that I received, and in fact, I just got it today, which I was waiting for it to arrive so I could film this video in time, hopefully early on enough in Cimmerian September to kind of kickstart that event. And that is the Galance version of the Complete Chronicles of Conan. Leather bound, smells great, nicely put together. This came out from Galance in 2009, I guess. And it's got a nice map on the inside, and also by Robert E. Howard. Look at this great list of novels and stories. Very short list of novels up here, and a massive list of stories. I'm pretty sure the number I've heard bandied about is around 600 stories, short stories, that he wrote before he sadly committed suicide at such a young age. Just a tragic, tragic thing. Think of all the fantastic stories we were deprived of, not to mention, you know, him being deprived of his life, sadly. The Centenary Edition. This is edited with an afterword by Stephen Jones and illustrated by Les Edwards in Galance in London. So starting with the essay that Howard wrote, the Hyborian Age. And this has a nice little dedication or acknowledgement there to, in memory of Karl Edward Wagner, who began this project more than a quarter of a century ago, and L. Sprague de Camp for keeping the Hyborian Age alive. So, long list of stories, every single Conan story in here. I know Steve at Heroic Book Adventures showed this off in one of his Mammoth Tomes videos recently, and this one is easily clocking over the 800-page range to qualify as a mammoth. It's 925 pages, plus this little author's note about, or author bio about Robert E. Howard. Howard was the Thomas Wolfe of fantasy, and most of his Conan tales seem to almost fall over themselves in their need to get out. A quote from Stephen King on the back. Nice, very nice tome. I'm very pleased to have this. I do have several, books from the earlier decades published that contain Conan stories, but it's nice to have them all in one fell swoop. Okay, and next, I showed this off briefly in my very fun live chat with Chris at Liminal Spaces and Virgil at Literary Books, Literally Liminal, episode 11. I briefly showed this copy of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is a Fingerprint Press or Fingerprint Books edition. And it looked a little nicer online than it turned out to be. This is published in 2024. But, it's very lightweight, which I guess is nice. It's not like a heavy, really well-made and well-bound Barnes & Noble type classic, illustrated classic book or whatever. But it's quite nice in its own right. And I have a couple of copies of Dracula back in storage in the US, but I don't have any here with me. So short of getting a Penguin edition or an Oxford World Classics edition, I saw this one online for a commensurate price and picked it up. So I'm very, very familiar with the story of Dracula from multiple adaptations, including what I feel is the best, the 1979 BBC 6-part Dracula that starred Louis Jourdan as the Count, a very sophisticated version of the Count, and Frank Finlay as Van Helsing and some other fine actors and actresses. And that's a terrific version. There's lots of other good versions, including the Hammer version with Christopher Lee, Horror of Dracula. Like I said, I'm very familiar with the general broad outlines of the story from all the TV and movie adaptations, but I've never actually read the book. And I know it's an epistolary novel, where a lot of it takes the form of correspondence and newspaper articles and telegrams and other excerpts, diary excerpts. Looks really interesting, and this has some beautiful end papers inside, and each chapter starts with a nice kind of all black background with the design there. And the funny thing about this was, and a little photo of Bram Stoker there, and it's got gotta love the ribbon that you can use for a bookmark, etc. But the funny thing was, this spray-on gilt, text block must have been done at the last stage of production of this book, because when it came to me, almost every single page, it was like it wasn't cut completely fully through, and so the pages were sticking together at the top. They're still a little bit gummy there, And I had to go through and very gently, page by page, you know, take my hand and kind of fold up, you know, move it up to split the page out without causing any rips or tears, which I managed to do. Even clumsy oaf Jeff managed to do it with great care. You know, when there's something that I really want to take care of, I treat it very gently. Other times I might be akin to a bull in the china shop with some things, as my wife is wont to complain upon occasion. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading that. I think that's in Randy Ray's The Literate Texans, the Lone Star Book Club that he's doing. That's the October choice, October pick for his 2025 Lone Star Book Club, I do believe. And I'll probably try to get to this Halloween or this October coming up, as well as reading some occult detective stories and some other horror tales. Speaking of horror, or at least strange, weird tales, but in the more mid-20th century vein, is this. The Charles Beaumont Perchance to Dream Selected Stories Penguin Edition. Now, I had no idea that Penguin had actually published this until I saw this in the video by Bradford at Dread Pirate Books. Now, he's busy writing away and not doing much on his YouTube channel at the moment, but thank you, Bradford, for bringing this book to my attention. This edition was published in 2015. So it has a foreword, Beaumont Remembered, by Ray Bradbury, and an afterword by William Shatner, which of course is very, very brief. But William Shatner starred in a couple of Twilight Zone episodes, very good ones. And, you know, when he was a young actor being taken a little more seriously than he maybe was, you know, post-Star Trek. And when he wants, he's a very, very fine actor, Mr. Shatner. And he shares a brief memory of Charles Beaumont. Now, Charles Beaumont unfortunately died very young of a very kind of strange, prematurely aging, wasting disease. He was a prolific writer and a very fine one. And some of these stories are, of course, ones that were just published for magazines, etc. And some were actually either written, I don't know if they were written before or after the Twilight Zone scripts, but there's one here, The Jungle, which is one of my favorite early Twilight Zone episodes. Let's see, The Howling Man, which is an absolute classic Twilight Zone episode. Most of these don't appear to be related to Twilight Zone, and many of them I have not read. So he was a very fine television scripter and scriptwriter, screenwriter, and of course wrote a few movie scripts as well in his short but busy career. Apparently he was a real mentor to other authors, and he was very well liked by his contemporaries. And I'm excited to get into this. So it's not, again, I love short stories and novelettes, and especially classic. When it comes to like horror, this is what I prefer to read. Horror, supernatural tales that are shorter in length than a full-length novel. And, they're usually more punchy and leave more of a kind of impact when they're short like that. And I don't ever usually read a short story collection all the way through. It's quite rare that I do, but I will pick a few stories out from this and get to them hopefully in October. Spooky season coming soon. If only the weather here in Japan, the exceedingly overly hot weather here, would cooperate when we get to October, but it'll probably still feel like summer. Oh, now before I forget, there was one more book that I received, and that is the Men's Adventure Reader here. Now, this was published in 2022 by Bill Cunningham and Bob Dice. These are the gurus of men's adventure magazines that proliferated during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, along with Wyatt Doyle, who works with Bob Dice on the Men's Adventure Library. And then we have the Men's Adventure Quarterly magazine, which a few of which I've showed off, I believe, in past videos, which are beautiful pieces of work with reproduced art from those magazines, and various covers and girly galleries, etc. Of course, the Men's Adventure Library books, which are beautifully put together. Well, this is a kind of a sampler, I guess, from the magazines. It's quite cheap. I saw this on Paul Geeks Love Dogs cool video channel. He has all sorts of different books that he finds and gets, both new and old. And I saw this one here, and this is one I didn't have. And again, it's in black and white, and it's more of a sampler. It's not put into kind of a themed issue like the Men's Adventure Quarterly, which has like all Westerns issues, Vietnam War issue, UFO issue, etc., Croc Attack issue. This is a mix of different genres that would appear in the Men's Adventure magazines, and reproduces some of the art in the typical very stylish way that Bill Cunningham arranges the magazines. So the first story, The Cannibal Bride of Chief Petty Officer Maury. And what else do we have in here? Beauties for the Nazi Artist of Agony. Again, with some ads from the magazine and some of the lurid artwork that was done. Here's another one. What do we got? This one, Hitler's Baboon Tortures in Mabuti. Again, some pretty, lurid titles and stories. Here's a great one. This one, Up to My Neck in Live Lobsters. Guy losing some digits or limbs from lobster attack. The Tattoo Gang's Vicious Fire Torture of the Society Debs. Anyway, and it's interspersed with these kind of cheesecake glamour girl profiles. Here, this is Sexy Spirit. These are all things that appeared in magazines like Stag and For Men Only, and all these ones that a lot of these stories are pulled from. And what else do we have? Blonde of the Month, etc. So it really reproduces in a sort of grab bag approach the sort of thing that you would have gotten in a typical Men's Adventure magazine. Death Watch of the Second Platoon, right? It's a little hard to get that full picture out. Here's a good one. Rebel Joy Girl Cavalry. Anyway, the Men's Adventure Reader. And looks like a lot of fun. It's not nearly as expensive as some of their other, but much more lush and colorful and thicker magazines or books. So it's very affordable. I think I got it for probably about $7 or something. Now here's some more nice cheesecake there. It's a cool little thing. Should be fun reading. These are a little more salacious of kind of stories from these men's adventure tales than I generally gravitate towards. I'm, down for the animal attack and the Western stories and spy stories. And they released a Private Eye one not too long ago, which I really need to get a hold of. But anyhow, this was fun to receive, and I'll look forward to perusing that in more detail at a later date. Anyway, that's the end of my little mini book haul. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all the comments and all the new subscribers I've been getting recently. And I hope you'll find something of value on this channel. And I will talk to you before too long in the next video.